Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Tyak. I lead programs here within the AWS Partner Network for ISVs. Today, we're going to talk about co-selling with independent software vendors, or ISVs. AWS has years of experience supporting tens of thousands of ISVs to build and grow their business on AWS. And one significant area of investment to support ISVs in growing their business is through co-selling. So today I'm going to share some foundational background around how AWS views co-selling with ISVs and some important information to keep in mind as you build your co-selling strategy with AWS. I'll share what the journey looks like to successful co-selling with AWS and the programs and resources available along the way, including through the AWS ISV Accelerate program, which we're really excited to talk to you guys about today. And finally, we'll walk through examples of ISVs who have successfully navigated this journey with strong results. So as a starting point to kick us off, let's start with how we define co-selling at AWS. Co-selling at AWS is defined as a sales motion where AWS and the ISV work together on an opportunity at a mutual end customer. And this can accelerate the sales cycle, uncover net new business for either AWS or the ISV, and potentially unlock new points of entry. So it's important to call out that co-selling does not mean that AWS and the ISV are selling services on behalf of each other. So some examples of what co-selling could look like in practice include having a planning call with the AWS account manager and the ISV account manager of our mutual customer to discuss the opportunity and ways that each team can support each other. It could mean introducing each other to new contacts at that customer and assisting in building trust and relationships with those customers, and also continued alignment on the opportunity as it grows within the account. So when we co-sell together, AWS and ISVs each bring value to the table, ultimately towards serving the needs of our mutual customers. And AWS adds value in that co-selling experience in multiple ways. So such as our relationships with the millions of active customers on AWS each month, really built from a foundation of the trusted AWS brand. Also, the AWS Marketplace provides a mechanism to reach more AWS customers, and it provides easier deployment and procurement of your ISV solutions at scale, really offering a unique way to reach those AWS customers. And finally, the AWS Partner Network, which you're all familiar with, and we'll talk a little bit more later around the different resources that APN brings to the table when we co-sell together at our mutual customers. And AWS is really excited to work with ISVs for a number of reasons. So ISV products help achieve business outcomes for AWS customers, and in many cases, decreasing the time to value for our mutual customers with ISV product ready-made solutions. And this truly allows them to focus on their core differentiations that they can drive business outcomes for their own customers. And along those lines, many ISV products can speed up customer adoption of AWS and get customers to AWS sooner. This can increase consumption of AWS products and services. And finally, ISVs, you all offer specialized experience and industry knowledge with deep customer relationships in many different areas of the customer business. One example, in the public sector space, many ISVs have access to key customer contracts and really add value for AWS to work with ISVs. So when we each bring these contributions to the table as part of our co-selling engagements, we can add incremental value to our mutual customers. So we can expand and enhance our relationships with our mutual customers and truly building that trust that the teams are working together to support their holistic cloud objectives. This can result in identifying new opportunities to help our customers achieve their business outcomes on AWS and also enable us to solve customer challenges quicker. To realize these benefits in practice, it's really important to know who at AWS you could work with on an opportunity at our mutual customers. So there are three major teams to keep in mind and to be familiar with. The AWS Field, the AWS Partner Network, and AWS Marketplace. So the AWS Field interacts directly with AWS customers and manages that relationship with them. AWS Partner Network, or APN, supports partners like you with co-selling, go-to-market funding, market development funding, building a business plan, development resources, right? Many different mechanisms along the way. And finally, AWS Marketplace helps partners bring their solutions to market and then also helps customers procure those solutions. And within these teams, there are 6 important roles who may support you in co-selling. These roles include your partner development manager, AWS account managers, partner success managers, AWS Marketplace customer advisors, solutions architects, and the ISV success managers. So on the APN team, the PDM is your primary point of contact. And they will work with you to develop your partner business plan, different partner processes and activities alongside that business plan, help manage opportunities with AWS through things like pipeline reviews, and identify new mechanisms to drive business together. Now, in the field, when you co-sell with AWS, you will primarily work with your customer's AWS account manager, who again is part of the AWS field team. And like we mentioned before, they lead adoption of AWS with customers. So they're really responsible for working backwards from the customer business needs and objectives. Alongside the account manager, there are a couple other roles that are important to understand that partner with the account manager. So the first is the Partner Success Manager, the PSM, who again is part of the AWS field team, and they drive adoption and help connect customers to consulting partners and system integrators. Also on the AWS field team and who work closely with the PSMs and the account managers are the ISV Success Managers. And they work with the sales teams to select the right ISVs to drive a customer's business outcomes. So they're tightly aligned to the customer and their account manager to understand the customer business needs and help connect them to the right solutions. And on the marketplace team, the customer advisor drives, they're customer facing and they help drive adoption of AWS Marketplace with customers. And finally, solutions architects. Solutions architects help customers successfully adopt AWS. You're likely working with an APN partner solutions architect who is familiar with your solution. And you could also work with a sales solutions architect on the AWS field team who is familiar with our mutual customer's environment and can act as a technical resource for both the customer and the sales team. And all of these teams are motivated by the same thing, the customer. So working backward from what the customer's needs and objectives are and how we can build and maintain their trust as a trusted advisor to help them meet these objectives. And this underlying principle carries through to the different goals that our field teams may carry. So some examples of those goals include goals on customer AWS service adoption, or goals on co-selling with AWS partners or ISVs like yourselves, and potentially AWS Marketplace solution adoption, just as some examples of how that customer obsession translates into goals that the teams may carry. Next, we'll dig into the investments AWS has made in co-selling with ISVs, the journey to co-sell success with AWS, and the programs and resources available along the way. So before we jump in, it's really important to note that your partner management team is the foundational backbone of your co-selling strategy. So this team typically includes your partner development manager and your partner solutions architect. Now, the first place to start in some foundational tools and programs is an ISV Partner Path and also enrolling in the APN Customer Engagement Program. So we'll dig into a little bit of both of those. So ISV Partner Path was just announced by Doug at the partner keynote. And it's available in January, and it's designed specifically for ISVs to help them build and grow successful businesses in the cloud. So ISV Partner Path gives partners access to curated programs, prescriptive guidance, AWS support, and other resources uniquely aimed at helping ISVs accelerate business growth. And one of the mechanisms and ways we support through ISV Partner Path is through a foundational technical review through which you would engage with a partner solutions architect on an overall assessment of your solution to reduce operational risk and ultimately provide the best experience for our mutual customers. Now, one of the paths within ISV Partner Path is co-selling with AWS. So we're going to talk much more detail about that now. In addition to ISV Partner Path, the other foundational program that's really important to be familiar with is the APN Customer Engagement Program, or ACE. And ACE provides partners with a platform to collaborate with AWS sales and marketing teams, request funding and technical resources as you co-sell with AWS. Really, it's the foundational tool where you and AWS teams can collaborate and share information on opportunities. And through bidirectional lead and opportunity sharing, you can share opportunities with AWS to engage on, and AWS can share opportunities with you to engage on. So next, we encourage you to spend time building your strategy and focus areas for co-selling and getting executive alignment at your company on that strategy. So for example, how does co-selling with AWS further your overall sales and growth strategy? Which customer engagements will working with AWS add the most value for AWS, you, and the customer? Perhaps you're looking to expand into a new country or industry vertical, and AWS's relationships there could add value and credibility. Or perhaps smaller dollar and higher volume transactions aren't where your team wants to engage with AWS, and instead you decide to focus on larger enterprise customers where AWS has deep relationships with those customers. As you're going through this strategy, you can work closely with your partner management team through this process as you build out your business plan and define what that strategy is. And as part of building this strategy, there are programs and resources to help within specific places. So I mentioned AWS Marketplace earlier. Possibly you would explore deciding that listing on AWS Marketplace is a valuable mechanism to reach more AWS customers and aligns with your overall ISV strategy. Additionally, we have different programs to help connect you to different parts of the business. So one example of that would be the AWS Public Sector Partner Program, which really helps partners grow their business in the public sector space. Once that strategy is there, one of the other really important foundational elements to put in place is a strong better together story with clearly identified customer use cases and product differentiation. So how does your solution align with AWS to drive a positive customer outcome? And this better together story is then documented in a field ready kit, which is your primary mechanism to educate the AWS field on that better together story and on your solution and how it delivers customer outcomes. So this kit includes a solution brief and a sales brief, and we have templates that are easy for you to access. And this is a really important way to differentiate your solution through this better together story and how your differentiated offering drives and solves customer business objectives. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is APN funding is available to help you build this solution collateral. So it's an approved use case that you can use through the funding that APN provides you. And finally, it's important to build early co-selling success. So you'll hear this through partner examples that we'll talk through later, that building these early wins are critical to laying the foundation for a successful co-selling flywheel. So by sharing opportunities you'd like to work with AWS on through ACE, you can begin engaging with the field teams and getting some of those early customer success stories launched. So by working with the field teams on these early wins, sharing your field ready kits that have your better together story and your solution differentiation, this foundation is critical to driving awareness of your solution within the AWS field, earning trust, and then also leading to potentially new opportunities that field team could recognize to bring to you now that they have an understanding of your solution, how it's differentiated, and how it solves specifically customer needs and objectives. And this is a great time to start exploring the AWS Competency Program, which helps you market and differentiate your business to AWS customers by showcasing your skills in specialized areas across industries, use cases, and workloads. And like I mentioned, this is a great mechanism to differentiate yourself from the tens of thousands of ISV partners. Another really critical mechanism when it comes to helping to build the right foundation for co-selling is internal processes within your sales teams to educate your field teams on how to work with AWS and make the process as easy and friction-free as possible to raise their hand and engage with AWS. And we'll talk a little bit about that later as a great example of how a partner has effectively done that. So we're really excited to talk to you today about the AWS ISV Accelerate program. So once you have these foundational elements in place, we're excited to share that you can join the AWS ISV Accelerate program for an even deeper and accelerated level of co-selling engagements with the field. And participation in ISV Accelerate helps you access new business and accelerate sales cycles through that deeper connection to the AWS sales organization, and additional support and benefits in working with the millions of active AWS customers every month. So specifically, those benefits include compensation and incentives to the AWS sales teams, providing them with cash incentives when they support participating partners on opportunities, and with an enhanced incentive when they introduce participating partners into new business that launches on AWS. Participating partners get visibility within the AWS sales organization through an internal solution library, highlighting that field-ready kit that we talked about in the journey that highlights the differentiation for your solution and how it solves customer needs and objectives. And then also prioritized access and support from the co-selling support teams that we talked about earlier in the slide. So specifically that ISV Success Manager team. They work backward from what the customer needs and what their objectives are, and they prioritize working with ISVs who are in ISV Accelerate, who have that clear documented differentiation and have validated use case where they've helped customers meet those needs and objectives. And finally, I want to highlight that through ISV Accelerate, partners who are participating have favorable listing fees when they list their solution on AWS Marketplace. So from here, we want to share some examples of how ISVs have built successful co-selling strategies with AWS, navigating this journey, and participating in the ISV Accelerate program. So we'll share 3 examples with you. We're going to talk about Infor, a business application ISV built for industries and is all in on AWS. We'll talk about Datadog, a DevOps partner who has had great success in building those foundations for success that we talked about earlier. And then we'll talk about Pluralsight, a workforce development company who decided to list their solution on Marketplace as a marketplace private offer and found great success building a co-selling campaign around that listing. So we'll start with Infor here. So Infor has built a strong partnership across both technical elements with AWS and go-to-market elements with AWS. And what they really focused on was working backward from what makes the most sense for their strategy with AWS. So they really strategically focused in on customer segments where co-selling with AWS would add value to the customer. So specifically leveraging co-selling to help expand into specific industries and geos. So along with that, they created focused content and collateral aligned to those industries and geos that they wanted to target, that made the most sense for them and aligned to their strategic sales objectives. And the way that Infor has leveraged co-selling with AWS and going jointly to customers in conversations is really to bring credibility to those conversations. So what they have found is that by aligning the infrastructure conversations that the AWS account manager is having with the customer with the software conversations that Infor is having with the customer, that bringing those two conversations together has added a lot of value to those sales cycles and also has brought credibility to the conversation for both parties. And once they defined these strategies and built successful collateral around it and really honed in on the value of co-selling for Infor specifically, they got alignment internally within their executive team and made sure that the alliance team was resourced effectively to be able to execute on that strategy. And really strong results with all of this work. So pipeline with AWS nearly doubled year over year after implementing this strategy that we just talked about. And just as an example here to demonstrate that, so a quote from the managing sales director at Infor really highlighting how working with AWS has helped them expand into different verticals and regions. Specifically, the sales director is from Mexico, focuses on Mexico. So next we'll talk about Datadog. And Datadog, like I mentioned earlier, they found a lot of success in building that successful co-sell motion early and starting early with building those foundations. So where they started was aligning the co-selling strategy with Datadog's sales strategy. So focused in on which customers and opportunities would yield the most lift for both Datadog and Datadog's customers when they work together. And really focusing on aligning Datadog's customer-centric focus to AWS customer-obsessed focus. And from there, the team made sure that their Better Together story was really well documented and really clearly outlined the differentiation, and then made sure that the Datadog sales team was trained on how to work with AWS, understood what that looked like, and understood what those best practices of working with AWS were. So things like what information to take to a joint meeting, being very clear on where the team is at in the sales cycle, what the customer's needs and objectives are, how Datadog potentially solves those objectives, and what specifically the team is asking for from support from AWS and how the two can work together. So those foundations were really important to build. And in addition to that, the team really built processes internally that made it easy for the teams to engage. So the key here is incorporating the co-selling with AWS into the Datadog field sales cycle. And again, make it as easy as possible for the two teams to engage through things like leveraging the ACE tool, like I mentioned before, and making sure that there were reusable assets that were ready and available for the teams to use. So by laying this foundation, the Datadog Alliance team and the Datadog field teams and AWS worked together and built trust on these preliminary and early wins. So this really built the foundation and the groundwork of that flywheel. So by promoting those successes, getting those early wins, it helped to build that trust and laid a really great foundation. And building this trust and awareness and groundwork for that flywheel paid off. So as it's noted here, from Datadog, now about 25 to 30% of their opportunities that they're managing with AWS originated from AWS. And you can see here from Laura Rippins, the Alliance Lead at Datadog, really that the spirit of collaboration has really benefited the teams here. And the pipeline of opportunities is balanced. Of course, some are sourced by Datadog, some by AWS. And she provides another compelling stat here, which is that the 2020 opportunity pipeline is over 10x what it was in 2019. And finally, we'll share a little information about Pluralsight, who's a leading technology workforce development company. And similar to Datadog, Pluralsight spent time building the foundations of co-selling. So clearly documenting the AWS and Pluralsight better together story, building trust with the field through early co-selling engagements, and really using a regular pipeline review cadence with their PDM to hone in on and figure out what the strategy is and where it makes most sense to work together on opportunities. And from these learnings, this year, Pluralsight worked with the AWS Marketplace team to launch a Marketplace private offer listing. And they built a co-selling campaign around that listing. So this offer included a 30-day free trial and also a sales play around it directly for the AWS field that included an email template that they could send to their customers, a Pluralsight landing page, and also enablement for the AWS field around what Pluralsight is, the value it adds to their customers, and how Pluralsight is a differentiated product. The great thing about this approach is it provided a clear, actionable offer for the field. So it provided them a mechanism to clearly understand Pluralsight's offering and then an actionable activity that they could then take with that knowledge, identify the right customers for the solution, and then proactively reach out to their customers. And again, results here very strong from this campaign. So about 4.5 times growth in joint opportunities after launching this campaign, and over 7 times growth in wins between AWS and Pluralsight. Again, from Eric Alder, the head of partnerships at Pluralsight, a great demonstration of what this relationship and what co-selling has meant to Pluralsight and to AWS. So with that, I want to leave you with a couple calls to actions here. So the first is to visit the AWS ISV Accelerate webpage, where you can learn much more about the ISV Accelerate program that we just talked through today, including more specifics on benefits and requirements and how to get started. We encourage you to sign up for a training that the AWS training and certification team has made available to APN Partners, which is called AWS Solution Training for Partners, APN Technology Partners Co-Selling with AWS. And this goes into much more detail on some of the foundational mechanisms that I talked about earlier, like how to build a better together story, how to build a field ready kit, best practices for a joint meeting or a joint conversation with AWS. So really encourage you and your teams to explore that training and sign up for it. I encourage you to sign up for the ISV Partner Path coming in January, and also sign up for the ACE program, which is, again, like I mentioned, that foundational tool and how we can have bidirectional lead and opportunity sharing. So with that, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please remember to fill out the session survey and let us know what you thought. Enjoy the rest of reInvent.